Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session, Talk It Up, the Speaking Portfolio and Application. Sheri Rhodes has a master's in education of TESL and has 20 years experience in both Korea and Canada. She's an online trainer and course designer for Advanced Consulting for Education, ACE, in language teaching and technology, and the curriculum coordinator in international education at Mount Royal University in Calgary, Canada. Take it away, Sheri.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for being patient. I am now going to have to speed through this, but I hope that everything else will work smoothly from here. So thank you for joining. And today we're talking about speaking portfolios. Really, what does it look like when you are giving your audio your feedback to the audio files, looking at what the tasks might be composed of, and then the types of content of those of the feedback. Let's go forward. I've missed out. If you've introduced yourself in the chat window, please do it again so I can just follow along, and I'll let you do that quickly and say where you're joining us from. And then the next, got some people from West Coast, the East Coast, the names that I'm familiar with. Welcome to everybody, and I'll just see those as they go up. And also add what is your primary teaching context. This is something that I know that those of you in Lincoln are doing portfolios, certainly there's an application for you, but I think that it's not limited to that group, so I'm interested in who else might be here and what kind of context you are interested in. Yep, so we do have quite a few links, but some other things as well. Fantastic. Great, and let's move forward. The plan today, I'll review a few things that were from the previous presentation that I gave at a number of conferences last year that leads into this. It was focusing on the tools themselves and why, the justification for using the audio. And I will still talk a little bit about that, but I'm going to take it a bit further. Really, the challenge of assessing speaking is the fact that there are so many different things, factors that go into what we might understand as what good speaking looks like. The impression that we have of how well someone speaks definitely is based on a wide variety of different factors. And so how do you capture all of that, and how do you decide what you want to focus on when you are giving feedback to your students? Scott Thornberry introduces some of those dimensions that as teachers we need to be aware of as we're teaching speaking with skills to our students. Certainly correct pronunciation can affect, but not accent doesn't always need to affect what's happening, but it is something we need to address. There's a variety of genres and contexts that we might be working with or that our students might be concerned about, and so those are things that we need to be aware of. The nature of the communication, is it transactional or interpersonal? Are they interactive in their participation or non-interactive, and is the speech act something that is planned or is it unplanned? There are conversational strategies that go into that as well. There are the rules and structures of what's appropriate in the different contexts and giving them some tools, some strategies for repair if communication is breaking down. What are the features and the things they need to be aware of for what is natural and spontaneous speech? Then there's the functional exchanges that we enter into, whether that's lexical chunks or patterned exchanges. Looking at all those aspects are important for when we're talking about what we are addressing with the students. Another way that we can look at that is what are those discrete skills that we want to address, and then the more integrative skills. The discrete skills, certainly there will be some instruction that is more accuracy focused, and that might be then using the language systems, pronunciation, grammar application, vocabulary choice. But then all of the integrative skills where really the focus is on that meaningful communication and the appropriacy, the pragmatic use of language in the different contexts. So that's speaking. When we think then about how we're going to address this with tasks in our classrooms, we need to have the idea of what our approach will be. And some of the tasks that we want to do are quite structured. If you're looking at the building blocks of a lesson plan, then you're looking possibly at that study practice phase where it seems very exercise driven, where you want them to be aware of the accuracy of what they're presenting and focusing on that. Some of those tasks could provide opportunities to compare results either to other students, to something that is a model that's been given. The answers are shorter, so you can deal with them a little bit more directly in your feedback. Types of those might be the read aloud, so that you can address things, different pronunciation features that might occur. Sentence repetition, where they are hearing and repeating, where they are recognizing patterns and producing those. There's other aspects of memory and processing that make that not necessarily a great testing tool, but certainly something for exercising and practicing some of those chunks of speech. Sentence completion, where they are recognizing how to do that and use an appropriate end to something that you will begin and give them a sentence start for. Short answer questions. All of these might be applied in things like oral grammar or being able to respond appropriately in different contexts. And then that reacting to phrases, and that will come up in a lot of the pragmatic instruction that's on different functions. And so they're provided with what that phrase or expression might be that they are then asked to respond to, and what would be an appropriate response, what would be expected, and what might not fit as well. Understanding then the social context and of that speech act. So tasks that are structured have those characteristics. But in our classrooms, we do a lot of tasks that are open-ended, and this is where we really get that chance for rich communication in the classroom. There's a way to approach that with discourse type. And so we can look at description, narrative, instruction, and comparison as fairly accessible levels of discourse types, where students right from the lowest levels can describe and can build the skills to do those different tasks. We get to higher level or richer types of tasks with explanation, justification, prediction, and decision, where there is more subjectivity, more judgment brought in, and they're able to then communicate opinions and ideas to others when you're building tasks within that type of instruction. These discourse type tasks could be based on looking at images or responding to written materials. It might be a discussion that is happening and they're responding from oral prompts in that discussion. Within the open-ended tasks, you have different types of activities that I think as instructors we're all familiar with. The information gap, where the communication is meaningful and they are looking for the information that they don't have from others. The decision-making tasks, where they have a goal at the end and problem solving as they do that. The role play, where they are having that safe environment to enact something that happens out in the context of their world beyond the classroom. And then looking at different situations specifically and how they would react appropriately within those situations. So as you're designing your tasks and as you're thinking about all of those different aspects of what you want to do in your classroom with that group of students at that particular time, you need to understand your focus. You need to understand what the goal is, the objective that you're reaching for within that task. There's a lot of time where I think we're really, our default might be to say a task is so that they have speaking practice. And speaking practice is essential, but not understanding what your focus of that speaking practice is missing an opportunity. And so to every time you engage in speaking practice, recognize what that focus might be, can give you a better way to address the feedback that comes later. So we're going to talk a little bit now about why we would do this with audio recording tools and why just doing this within the classroom maybe isn't going quite far enough. When we capture the production of their speech acts, there are distinct advantages that are for both us and for the learners themselves. This is from Graham Stanley, and he addresses that the learners have opportunities that are beyond what we can provide if we don't have those audio tools in the classroom. For our advantage, we can hear at a time where we're not interrupted by everyone speaking, and we can assess. And there's that playback feature, revisiting, did I really hear that correctly? Sometimes in a group setting, when everyone's speaking and you're surreptitiously observing over here and observing over there, you might not recognize some of the things that are happening with someone's speech. But with an audio recording, you have that chance. The advantage for the learner is to hear and compare. And again, comparing might be comparing to someone else in the class if you allow them to hear each other, or comparing to the model that you've provided. The thing that I think is really important and key is noticing. Noticing is something that while they speak, it's very difficult to actually do. I know that students, when they look at their writing, can go back and read it and say, oh, I did that, and correct themselves. But there isn't that opportunity to hear themselves if it's a one-time speech act. They have to have the audio recording to be able to notice some of the things that they might be doing and recognize that there's a chance for augmenting or changing their speech. Once they notice, everything else can happen. They can improve. They can engage in the learning process of why am I doing that? When do I do it? What should be happening instead? What are those barriers? And that happens through reflecting too, because in the Porfolio style we have multiple opportunities to then listen and reflect on their own speech. So this is where I'm going to ask you to click and go somewhere else, and then please come back. I'll just describe what you're going to hear or see, and then when you come back, to use the hand up feature that's just above the picture of me. and there's a little hands up. So do that when you've returned, and then you're able to let me know that you've seen it. So what I've got are 4 examples of tools that you can record your students with if you want to use it with them. I've got VoiceThread, SoundCloud, Vocaroo, and Tumblr. Now, instead of having you go to each of the links that are below the red line, I've done a screencast of all of the 4 links above the red line. So please use the screencast link. But if for some reason your system isn't allowing the flash file or what's happening there in the screencast, you could go to each of those links below quickly. They're about a 30-second clip at each one, depending on which one. VoiceThread, you're going to hear a student speak about a graphic, and this is an academic student doing a speaking task. In SoundCloud, you will hear a student who is using a new vocabulary word to talk about emotional intelligence. In Vocaroo and Tumblr, I don't have student examples to share with you. I do have just an explanation of what the tool does with my voice, so you can just play those. So please go to Screencast, play, return, and I will wait until we see you come back. Thanks. And that's great. Those links will all be there when this presentation is saved, and so you can go back in. And even if you were to sign up to SoundCloud, you could test out the comment feature that's there to give things with, feedback with. I didn't include VoxelPop. It required the behind-the-scenes login, but I love VoxelPop as well and think it's a great discussion board tool. Okay, so let's continue. So those are examples, and I know that that's just a smattering of what's out there you could use. And honestly, if you don't have all of these, even just using what is on those students' phones, your smartphone, their smartphones, and some of these have apps, like the SoundCloud app, that makes that a very easy, seamless transition to posting that on a web page. There are lots of opportunities to do this. Yes, if you save the Vocaroo into MP3, it's yours. You keep that file, and so you're able to download it. And the same with the SoundCloud. If the students record in SoundCloud, those are all downloadable as well. The VoiceThread, that one doesn't download, that I believe, but and then the Tumblr, just using a telephone, and they don't need anything else to be able to do that once you're in the computer lab and have set up that account. And so they can do so much just from home with nothing if they don't have the tools. So those are the ways that we can capture that. But then what are we going to do? Oh, sorry, I was going to ask you. I know that there are other things out there. So in the poll, what have you used? Just a name or a tool, device that you have used if you are recording with your students? Love to hear if there's other ideas out there. Smartphones, absolutely. And someone's using Vocaroo. Automatic, yes, and Audacity. I was going to talk about that in a bit. And the phones all have lots of features, and different phones will have different things. Anagongon Link courseware, excellent. And the digital voice recorder that just plugs in with the USB. Yes, using cameras, and the camera video setting will allow you to capture that. Voice recordings on iPad. Lots of things. So I'm excited to know that you're trying it out, and so let's talk about then how are you using those recordings and giving them some feedback. Oh, well, the other thing about using recordings is speech is no longer location dependent, it's location independent because there are so many tools, and that is a great benefit. And why we want to do this, why we want that opportunity is that just like with writing portfolios where you can give them feedback and they can go and revisit their writings, would you ever take their writing away from them and never let them see it again, and then tell them, you were supposed to do paragraph 2 this way and you made some grammar mistakes in paragraph 3, but never let them see the writing sample? Well, of course not. But we seem to give them feedback for speaking with no reference, no artifact for them to refer to. So the portfolio and an audio recording of that is so helpful for them. Okay, and a little bit more, the fluency. Fluency is dependent both on the production of the speaker, but also the perception of the listener. And when the audio recordings are there, the students can take on both roles. We've got PBLA that's giving us a justification for this portfolio approach, that it has the aspect of analyzing data and also to reflect on what they've done. And those are key things that in speaking you need a physical artifact to be able to do that. Analyzing some comment sheets or a rubric is so much more disjointed for them. There are 4 aspects of assessment when we're looking at it. There's the assessment event. That's making sure that what we are doing to assess them is frequent enough that you have that chance to revisit something. The tool is what you're using to give them that feedback, to give them the assessment. Those need to be clear and understandable for the students. The process, so that they can see that there is a purpose for the feedback, there is a reason for it, and that it supports the students and shows them that we care, that we're their allies, we're trying to help them in their journey. And then the assessment decisions themselves, where they, whether it's a grade or whether it's some evaluation that then can give them something to build on for the future. Feedback is the most powerful single influence that makes a difference to student achievement. That can make the difference of working in isolation or having some guide, and that's why they come to class. That's why they're there with us, is because they want that guidance. There's components of feedback, and it's not just feedback. Have you heard of feed up and feed forward? When it's feed up, it's the learning objectives and outcomes that you're approaching. And so you are reaching for the goal, and that's the goal of your final outcome. Feedback, what is the progress that you've made, looking back and moving forward towards that goal. Feed forward then is, I've got the feedback, and where should I be going next in this journey? So you want to have all aspects clearly understood and defined for you before you're trying to work with the students. So I've talked about these things. This is just kind of capturing and consolidating the different types of tasks and the choices that we're making, the decision point of what are we going to do with feedback, and are we going to be recording it? What's our focus? The type of feedback that we typically give to students on speaking skills, most of us are certainly giving that face-to-face, individual or group, where we make a comment. We've observed something, and so we are going to either do it right at that time or revisit something that's after the fact. This oral feedback is challenging, and yet I think we default to it a lot, but they don't know if it's really where it applies, what did they say, how does that work, and so the opportunity to revisit and what they did in the Speech Act is very difficult. Certainly we have checklists and rubrics, evaluation grids, task reflections, and written comments that are all other ways that we can focus in on the feedback we want to give and then provide that for the student. But that's those are even more distant from the actual speech act. So much more challenging. Now I want to just put a little shout out for Shauna. Shauna W. Now I can't remember what your last name was. It Williams? Yes, Shauna Williams. Your session yesterday was fantastic on the different types of feedback tools. It was assessment and evaluation. Really liked it. Thank you for doing that. I was glad to see it fit so nicely into some of the things that you need to consider and some options that you have. So if you're interested in what those tools can look like, absolutely go and visit her session when that's archived, and it's a nice companion to this. So what is your number one method? I think we'll just let you think about that rather than waiting for a poll. But what is your default? Do you feel like it's always just comments you've gathered in a group chat at the end of try this, and here's some things I noticed? Are you using checklists and doing a lot of peer evaluation? What's your default, and what could you maybe try to explore a little bit more, especially if you've got those audio samples? Now, last 5 minutes here, I'm just going to speak directly on some of the considerations for using the audio clips in a classroom. And the first one is, when you're thinking of the audio clips, do you use those for the structured tasks, the discrete skills, or for the open-ended tasks and integrative skills? Certainly the first is shorter, more manageable, and a little bit easier to have the students compare to the models. So that one is one that you could really easily incorporate into a class. Open-ended tasks, integrative tasks, recording their presentations, things like that are great for them for the more reflective types of feedback that you might want to give. Whereas the structured tasks, discrete skills, you can give some very, very specific feedback. Have a plan. How are you going to collect all the audio clips? Are you saving links from the different web tools on a wiki page for each student? Are you going to have them save their audio on a flash drive? Do you build multiple samples within one tool, such as having a tumbler for each student and having them collect all their audio samples there from homework assignments that are given each week? I see that a lot of people are using wikis, the PB Works or Wiki Spaces, to collect and capture those examples. How are you going to connect your feedback with the actual audio file? What's the reference? How are you going to make sure those two pair up, that the students recognize what goes with what? For the read aloud tasks, the things that are very controlled, maybe you're focusing on pronunciation feature and you give them some reading text to do with that. Quickly, easily print out slips of a page with multiple examples of that, chop it up, and then as you're just going through and listening to each student's 45-second, possibly, clip, you can quickly make some notations right on there. It's something then you could give them the slips, ask them to make the notations, give the slips to a peer, have them make the notations. And then those notations you can easily direct to say, let's check all of our grammar use here. Let's check a pronunciation feature, something that you want to pay attention to. Grammar, I say this because even though they're reading a text, they don't realize they will skip words or they will lose subject-verb agreements and things like that they will read it the way they think it is and not necessarily what's captured on the page. If you have them doing a quick transcription of an audio a quick audio chunk, similar to what we did for the vocabulary one that you saw on SoundCloud, this comment about her stress, that was the one that I quickly typed out for each student and then made some notations and asked them to then consider and play back. So if it's short little pieces like that, transcribing it if you're comfortable with the keyboarding skills, is not too bad. Sometimes you're able to comment directly into the file. SoundCloud allows you a comment feature, and if you get the chance, then go back to that SoundCloud, create a free account, and then within that you should be able to, as you're listening to her speak, click on right at the point of speaking where she might do something you want to comment on, and the comment box underneath allows you to type in what you are commenting on at that exact moment in the speech file. So then she can play it back and see the comments that you've made at the exact moment where something went wrong in the SoundCloud. The Audacity is another tool that you can use. If you've collected those audio clips, you can easily insert some, now listen to that again, what are you doing here, kinds of comments along the way. In your feedback, reference the specific language examples. SoundCloud is the name of the program. We often, when we are speaking about their skills, we might make those kind of general comments, but if we're using audio clips, we can directly quote what they've done, and transcribing it, using it as a dictation, and then showing them what they've done with the specific language example is really helpful. Include a playback time code in your feedback if it's a longer chunk, or if you want them to address something at a very specific point, and you're going to say, now listen to the connecting that you do there, and don't point out the really positive things as well. This is not always feedback for the errors that they make, but also noticing the things that they're doing right and the way they're applying the things we've practiced in the class. When you're doing this for Porfolio, of course, it's multiple samples. You want to make sure that you're doing multiple samples of an actual task type. So if you do one read aloud, don't just stop there. Do multiple read alouds so that they can compare and see how that has improved. If you're doing some use the vocabulary, are they becoming more comfortable, more fluent? Pronunciation feature, how is that improving over time? And without that, you won't have the reflection opportunity, and you want to design reflection tasks that help them to notice their own development. Okay, so this is what we'll just skip over, but formative feedback, sometimes we do address the group more than we address the individual, and so that's the benefit of having the audio. When we're looking at rubric design, when we're looking at those checklists and evaluative tools, there's a lot of different ways to approach that. There isn't just one example, but the features are, such as you see here, they overlap, and you can see that those just need to be defined, and you need to have an understanding of what you are going to look at in each instance with the students. What, for their benefit, for their improvement, trying to give feedback in a general way every time isn't going to help them to improve. You want to choose and select and work along different paths and give them the opportunity to recognize what needs to happen and what they can do to improve. Yes, CEF, Common European Framework, and the IELTS, and then we have one from Melbourne, just to show the difference of adequacy of participation, quality of ideas. Some will be very specific to a task itself, and so your rubric might have some extra features because of the task. Using the portfolio approach with the samples, it's really all about promoting learning. It's the single most powerful tool when we use assessment well, and it's promoting their learning that will raise the standards, empower the learners. It it can be a critical piece to think about in our classrooms. Not just the upfront design and the task development, but what are we doing with those tasks after all. And so I want to leave you with that. And we've got a few minutes now. I'm sure there's been some questions. And so let's see if you want to add those to the chat box. We can talk about any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheri. You'll see in your private chat there are some questions that came up along the way.
Great. Okay. So CEF, yep, the Common European. Do you have students keep speaking assignments on a flash drive? That is a great way to do it. That way it's portable, and you can slip that into a binder that goes with them from level to level. If you are using speech audio samples that are downloadable or savable that way. Yeah, flash drives are great. Once you save Vocaru, yes, we answered that. You can save the MP3s. A good way to store is a collection. So, yeah, you've got all of that variety, whether it is flash drive, whether it is in the cloud. And so you could have Dropbox, or we have network drives, something where all of the students can keep those if they're in a cloud tool that can be shared. That's great. I teach online. Is there an audio recording tool that I can use over the phone or via Skype? Skype actually has a few add-on audio tools. The name is just out of my head right now, but I've used it so that I could record my Skype calls. Google it. I guess it's something that you would just kind of activate, and it will work alongside, and you tell them what your Skype account is, and it acts along with it. So, yep, definitely there are things that you could do. Let's see. Yes, but do you teach before you test? Absolutely. You can't give them. I find we do that, though. We'll often just say, okay, you've done a lot of speaking. We're going to give you a discussion test now, but what have you really taught them? And sometimes it seems like just giving them the opportunity to practice is what we do really well, but we don't necessarily do the teaching side of it. That's not what I was focused on today, but certainly you want to make sure, and that's part of knowing your task focus, what that skill is, and giving them the opportunity to understand what it looks like if it's good and if it's not so good. Having models, having things that can help them and guide them. If the student's not monitored, they tend to write down. Yes, that is true. And I don't know who was it that did it. Claudia, was it you? I don't know. Somebody had a computer set up in the back of the room, and she would just send the students. They wouldn't know what the prompt was. They would go and they would take their turn on Voxopop to record their audio samples. If you can do something in a lab where there's a time limit, and that's when you're doing it together as a class, a time limit, then that can avoid that tendency to write down. But at home, they might. But then you give them tasks at home that they either have to do that are very spontaneous, such as interview, or read alouds, which are not a write down. They've already got it there. They can practice as much as they like. So think about those types of things. Oh, there you go. How I can record. Thanks, Sabine. Thanks, Diane. Sorry for Sabine. That's great. Okay, yeah, it was another student. I don't know. I know, Claudia, you had always great ideas. So, okay, and so the task video, the first one that was speaking about an infographic. So they'd been taught some definite language axis and vocabulary that went along with how to look at and read charts and graphs. then they had been taught some comparative language, and so it was the language itself of talking about charts that was the focus in the first task. The second task was vocabulary, and using the vocabulary grammatically accurately in the task. So some of the words were adverbs and adjectives and nouns, and so they weren't necessarily, as they would continue to speak, using the verb as the correct part of speech as they were going. So you only heard one example of the word handle stress, but they had words like enthusiasm, and they were using it when they should have been using enthusiastically, and so things like that. So that was a vocabulary task. So those were the two that you had. I didn't put up the pronunciation ones, and I didn't have all of the samples. Okay, and how often do you do recordings? In a class where you have a focus on speaking skills, you want samples at least weekly, and so in a 12-week program you'd end up with 12. That's not a lot. So I was actually trying to do it twice a week and have a different focus in both of those times. And they were just happening. I would pass out digital voice recorders in the classroom and say, as you're doing this discussion, can you just please each answer one of the questions into the voice recorder, or can you each do something that was part of the task on your phones and whatever tool we happen to be using in that program. I used in that program a lot of the digital voice recorders. I didn't get to take them to the lab as often, and we were having issues in our computer lab. Yeah, we are in a college university setting, right? But, like I said, we were not in the computer lab, so I was using the digital voice recorders and their phones as the default. And anything else? Level, yes. University. But I come from a Link background, so in Link it was Link 3. And, yeah, the limited access to technology, I would set up maybe they used to have a place called Gadcast. It was so much better because you didn't have to do the initial step. But the Tumblr, if you can set that up, even set up something with your own phone, or set up something for them with their phones, if you can get their phone numbers and make that connection yourself and set up accounts for them, then they can just use their telephones and call in their speech samples, whether that's on their cell phones in the classroom, because even the marginally literate typically will have some kind of phone. Yeah, and so if it means setting it up for them, and I would just make kind of fake accounts but with their phone numbers so that it gives that connection so they can post, I would do that for them. Good microphone for recording in the computer. Yeah, I've used the Microsoft. The Sony ones are good too, and really they're, anything under between $25 and $50 typically will be good. How often was the twice a week or once a week minimum, but ideally twice a week. Anything else?
All right.
Okay,
I think we're
we're gonna wrap it up.